Welcome back to the Nassmet Hockey Podcast. James Nichols, John Zelli here with you. James, how are you doing today?
I am swell, busy as ever, trying to figure out what the hell is going on in Devil's Land because nobody's saying peep, and there's lots of big stories to go around. But, other than that, I'm doing well. How are you, pal?
I'm doing all right. We have some great guests today that
Yes, we do.
hardly need an introduction to
No, they
Islander
don't.
fans. Joining us are two heaping scoops of Islanders anxiety. Dan and Mike from Lighthouse Hockey. How are you both doing today?
Very well. Thanks you for having this on. Can't wait. This is going to be fun. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's I had like Mr. Peanut Butter crossover episode jokes in my head. I was trying to put something together, and it's probably a long time coming. I was on one of your shows because you both are crazy sports people, and record all the time. And so I was on your show a little while ago, and I want to make sure we return the favor. But talk about more of today's things, although it was very fun to talk about Trevor Linden.
Always is.
So I wanted to, this is like somewhat of a joke. Again, this is something I wrote almost right away. I've been wrestling with this for a little while. I think you'll both be able to provide some insight. What the fuck is going on with the Islanders? Like and I mean that in both like the comedic way and in all seriousness.
Yeah.
And in this conversation, I want to kind of, especially in the beginning, kind of have the conversation within the tension of last season and what we think is going to happen next year, and then we'll kind of get into next year. So I'll try to rein us in when possible, but I'll give you both a second to respond there.
I don't know. I mean, that's the question that Mike and I have been wrangling with since 2015. What the fuck is up with the Islanders? Nobody knows. And now they've gone into Lou Lamoriello radio silence mode, which is to be expected. And, again, something we talk about a lot is like that mode is great when the team is winning. When they're in conference finals and they go silent in the off season, hey, that's cool. I mean, we were just in the conference finals, but like when you have a really rocky season and then you end up, losing in the first round, and the series wasn't that bad, but I mean, it still left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And then you kind of go silent and we don't know anything. Yeah, I mean, that's fair to ask, but I mean, the funny thing about asking that question is like we're not going to get an answer anytime soon. I mean, the draft is like a week and a half from now, and I don't expect to. And they don't even have a pick in the first round, so they're not even going to be involved that time. So I don't know. I don't know when we're going to get an answer. It's a great question. I wish I knew when we were going to get an answer.
Yeah, it feels like we've been like lulled a little bit, and the last time I felt like this was in January, when the last thing I expected was the Islanders just on a random Monday night to come out of nowhere and trade for Bo Horvat. And this offseason, like last offseason, I think Lou kind of came out beforehand and almost gave a plan out in his own way, in his own cryptic way. I think what was the famous quote? We want to improve our offense, but also our defense, or something like that.
He talked about hockey trades.
And then really very little happened, right? Like the Romanov trade, which was fun, and then nothing. And spent the whole summer refreshing Twitter, waiting to see Nazem Kadri sightings at in Garden City, or Johnny Gaudreau getting a tour of a school or something, and none of that stuff ended up coming to fruition. So this summer, I feel like because of what happened last summer, the what the fuck is going on with the Islanders question is, I just am taking the bait, which is I am expecting absolutely nothing of substance to happen in the summer, and I'm doing this on purpose because I want to be surprised when Lou does something crazy, like trades for like Nick Ehlers or something, right? Like I want that. I want to be fooled by Lou again, like we were in January.
That's my man, Nick Ehlers.
I think it's interesting, and I don't want to rewrite history or anything, but it reminded me of a conversation that James and I had after the Horvat trade, which was, did Lamoriello whether, however that decision was made, or Kadri or whatever happened, like Goudreau, he ultimately didn't make that signing last summer. Was that a blessing in disguise? That's probably a better way to ask that question going into getting Horvat. Ultimately, was that the better move, blessing in disguise?
I think so.
Yeah.
Kind of reminded me of like the summer with Ryan Smith not re-signing, Drury, Gomez, all those guys. The one that killed me was when Victor Kozlov walked after that year. Like I wanted Victor back really badly, but and then you watch those deals just completely tank the teams that they signed him with, and that was the early stages of salary cap era. So teams are kind of learning that lesson the hard way, and the Islanders were able to kind of watch on the outside, not because they wanted to, but just because absolutely nobody wanted to play here besides John Sim and Ruslan Fedotenko, basically.
Right. Yeah. And that actually reminds me of the biggest bullet they ever dodged, which was Thomas Vanek, where didn't they offer him like $10 million or something to stay? And
Yeah.
he was like, I don't want to play in Brooklyn. And then he left.
Yes.
And so that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that. I mean, Horvat was here, and then what was it? A day later, he signed an 8-year contract for, that's a lot of money, but probably less than they would have had to pay for Kadri. I don't know what Kadri ended up making, or Goudreau for sure. So, I guess you could kind of say that, although, the jury's still very much out on Horvat. Like, he had that great beginning, completely went MIA through maybe no fault of his own. Lou, I mean, the fact that Lou even said that they overused him was like, what? Like, really? Oh, yeah, I guess we kind of did. That makes sense. So we'll have to see, how that works out. But yeah, it probably ends up working out in the long run. I mean, Kadri didn't really have a great season in Calgary, as far as I know. And Goudreau, I mean, we laughed at him all season long for having kind of a mediocre season for an extremely bad team. So,
and we booed him.
Yes, and we booed him, and we confused him, which is even better.
Yes, we confused him with our nasty booing.
Now, doesn't Lou admitting that, and then maybe this is going off script, John, stop me if it is.
No, this is okay.
Isn't Lou admitting that, or doesn't Lou admitting that kind of say, or at least tell himself, like, I need a better supporting cast here. Like, I overuse Bo Horvat. Obviously Matthew Barzal was hurt for the majority of the time, but can your whole team really hinge on a player or two? And if those two players aren't in your lineup, like, that's it. Your team is just, you can't make it work because you have to play, Bo Horvat over 20 minutes a night. And by the end of the season, and then come playoffs, he's exhausted and he can't go out there and perform at his peak.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me answer that question with another question. When was the last time the Islanders weren't like that? Because every time Adam Pelech gets hurt, the season is over. It ends right then and there until he comes back and like, oh, they're good again. Like,
Hudson Fashion got hurt before a game in Buffalo. We were like, we're screwed. We're
That's
gonna have
it,
to play
right.
Ross Johnston.
Right.
Well, I've said that a lot, where the Islanders are just one piece away from a Titanic catastrophe.
Basically, yeah.
And that can't be what, like, Ross Johnston can't be your backup plan.
Right.
Right. They don't even trust Varlamov to play a little more than 20 games at this point. Right. So and you're just going to ride. And that's a different question I have for later, riding Sorokin, like a horse. So, like, I'm not sure they can't operate like this all the time.
Yeah.
One thing too about Horvat, people always focus on the Barzal injury, but Pajot was hurt too for a while there.
Right.
And so they basically took him and they said, look, buddy, you were Bo Horvat in Vancouver. We want you to talk to this guy, Casey Cizikas, because that's who you're going to be for the next 2 months. It's just like a better version of Casey Cizikas. He had to, their centers were those basically, it was Nelson had to play the role of Horvat, of the Bo Horvat, because he's not as, I guess, trustworthy defensively as Horvat. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But then without Pajot, it was basically Horvat had to play the role of a second line scoring center and a third line checking center at the same time, because Otto Koivula or whoever was up during the times, right? Like they're not going to get the job done. And and it's such a funny conundrum with the team, because on one hand you're like, this team probably should have been better if just they managed it maybe a little bit better, they caught a different break, or a couple guys like Horvat didn't go ice cold at the wrong time. And then on the other hand, you're like, man, just the fact that they made the playoffs despite all that stuff is kind of impressive too. They were really, really bad in January. That team was so far from being a playoff team, just in terms of how they, not even just results, just like when you watch them, you're like, oh my God. Every time they scored, it was a minor miracle. So I still am torn on whether or not like I should be kind of encouraged by what they showed last season or discouraged by it.
Well, and the thing for me too is that, we read what we read the other day, and Lamorello admitting I used Horvat too much, but just a couple weeks before, at the media, or not even, not too long ago at the media availability, when he broke his silence, he also said, by the way, I want everyone back. And we're not going to change anything.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, do you want to improve, or do you want to just status quo this shit? And this has
been the conundrum going back a couple of years now. Like, we all like these guys. These guys have been here 10 years. Like, we don't want to see anybody go. But at some point, this team needs to improve. And, like, that's why, for us, I'm sure we're going to get to Josh Bailey at some point. But, like, just, he's such an obvious kind of spot to upgrade. Do I want to see Josh Bailey play for another team? No. Do I think they're going to get a lot for him? No. Would it suck? Yes. But something has to change somewhere, or else you're basically just going to run back the same team that barely made the playoffs and lost in the first round. Like, something has to be better.
The lesson here is that these guys just lie all the time.
Yes.
And that was found out the hard way by everybody in the Toronto media a couple of months ago, when they didn't believe Kyle Dubas was capable of telling a lie, man. If you're employed by an NHL team, especially if you are a head coach or a general manager, you are lying more than you're telling the truth when there's a microphone in front of your face.
Yeah.
And people still are shocked by it. Like the outrage, or the way that people took Kyle Dubas at face value during his press conference. It's like, he's lying to you. It's his job is to lie to you right now. And you guys are paid to cover people like that. And you don't realize that this man is just absolutely lying to you. And then they found out a couple weeks later, wow, that guy was not telling the truth. And Lewis, I feel Lewis the same way, right? Like, he's just going to lie to us when he talks and just keep lying. And you have to be able to pick out the 1 out of every 10 things that I think are probably true. And the one thing I believe is true from what he said was when he was like, yeah, it's probably curtains for Josh Bailey on Long Island. And Dan and I affectionately, refer to Bailey and this kind of group as the uncles. And when you losing one of the uncles is going to absolutely break my heart into smithereens, but I'll have to get over it.
And that's a good segue into a question about, is this still the same team that went to the conference finals? I think a lot of people are hanging on to this idea. And after what happened the last 2 seasons, I'm not so sure of that anymore. I think there's a point when the excuses run out. And what we saw, it's really hard for me. I've said this to James. They're professionals. Figure it out, right? If you're a good team, no, you can't say that at any of our jobs.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I just go to my performance review in July and just say, you know what? I had a really bad year. It was just a down year, and I just got to hit the off season and really hit. No, that's not a thing. They're gonna say you're on a performance enhancement plan, and you got till September to ship up, or we're gonna fire you. Right? That's it. And we just don't have that. Is it time to kind of move on from that now? I guess the major media won't, right? They're not going to move on from that. But as people close to the team, do we need to move on?
I mean, to a certain degree, like, it is the same, but you're missing Eberle, you're missing a couple other guys. Taves obviously is another one, and everybody's a year older. I think that's the main thing for me. Like, everybody's a year or 2 years now, in this case, older. And so it's really not the same team, but I'm with you. Like, that's my feeling on the power play. Like, we've hashed out how bad the power play was. We've wanted John McClain fired. We've wondered why is Noah Dobson still in the power play when it ain't working? Why is this? Why is that? And at the end of the day, dude, you got to score some power play goals. Like, you're on the power play, you got to score some goals. My dad, he watches games, but he's never seen the end of a game in probably 20 years because he always falls asleep, but he can never understand why teams don't score on the power play. And he's always like, they got a power play and they don't score. I don't understand. And I'm like, well, yeah, sometimes you don't score on a power play, but he's like, but they got like, he just doesn't understand that sometimes, you know, and with the Islanders, they take it to an extreme where they never score on the power play. So, you know, that to me is the biggest difference. But I don't remember that team, those conference finals teams being that bad on the power play. Like they used to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's all Jordan Eberle not being here, but you know, again, I think it's just age. Like those guys, they played a lot of hockey to get to those two conference finals, and you know, they're the same guys, but they're not the same guys. I don't know if that answers your question, but something like that.
And I'm just not emotional. Like I'm an Islander fan more than like anything, right? And like that means I'm going to be emotionally attached to these guys. So when someone's like, "Oh, is it time to move on from Josh Bailey?" My answer is going to be yes, but I don't want to. And that's the same answer I'd give you with like, "Is it time to move on from this core group?" I mean, I would. If these guys are still playing for the Islanders when they're 56, I'll still be like, all right, I don't care. Like I fucking love Brock Nelson. Like get it back out there. I think it's just a lot of it is because of what happened with when Tavares left. Like that was a galvanizing moment that really connected us as fans to this group of guys and makes it really hard to say goodbye to them. And there are people calling for, you know, Anders Lee to try, like, can they move mountains to get his deal off the books, or, you know, is it worth trading someone like Brock Nelson, guys like, or, you know, going down to Bailey? And I'm like, God, that would just ruin my day. That would really ruin my day.
Well, John, so what did I say to you last week about Anders Lee? Do you remember?
I don't even know what happened yesterday.
In talking about Josh Bailey and how it looks like his time is coming to an end on Long Island, I said, well, John, do you know who the next Josh Bailey is going to be? Just scouring the discourse on Twitter, it's going to be Anders Lee, because everyone's going to hate that contract because everyone thinks that he is not producing enough to justify it, and he's going to become the next Josh Bailey in terms of who the fan base is trying to send to the moon.
Well, it's interesting because I heard there's a lot of discourse and, you know, how it's a copycat league and this and that, and the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think for a long time Vegas had a bad rap about, oh, they're sending players away, no one wants to go there. And I kind of heard the opposite for the first time recently, to say players want to go there.
Yeah.
No one's going to complain about being tasked with performing well. Right. And yes, they've been in the league 5 years now. They've made 2 Stanley Cup appearances. Players aren't going to complain about that necessarily. And they've been ruthless. And I think if there's anything, Lou is the opposite of that. There's no question about it. And you're seeing the results, right? You saw back to back and he stuck with it because there was something to stick with. There was something there. Yeah. Now there's not. There's no more. The smoke is gone. The fire is out, and they need to find a way to rekindle it. They were hoping that they could do that under Lambert. I'm not convinced, frankly. Again, when do the excuses eventually run out? At what point are they professionals and just have to figure this all out? And you know, James always reminds me he's dealing with the tools that he's given. But of anything for Lou to wake up and kind of see is, if it's not working anymore, you have to be a little more ruthless. He's all about these relationships. And a team like Vegas is I don't know, going to that point, you know, Mike, to your point before, no, it's going to be hard. It's hard enough to sign players on Long Island. You have to be a little more loyal. You have to show a little bit more to them. But you're seeing this success. They moved everybody. They just shipped out Pacioretty. They shipped, you know, anybody. It didn't really, for like a second, to Carolina.
No,
it was a 7th. I think it was a 7th because
it
was like it was like a just take his contract, please.
So what was Lou? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you just
we went over
this question like what was Lou doing?
Hey, good news. He's a UFA, so they could sign him this year.
Yeah, we'll get him
now that he's
a couple years older and wiser.
Right. Yeah. 2 knee surgeries or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that he's because I appreciate it on a human level that these guys, like I for a while I knew I'd wake up in the morning and Brock Nelson would still be there for me, and Josh Bailey would still be there for me, and all these guys would still be there. And he was so unruthless that when he had to cut ties with Jordan Eberle, not only did he do it, but he called the governor of Washington to make sure that he got his like work visa together. Like this guy is just Lou takes such good care of these guys at such a ridiculous level that I kind of just like fallen under the spell. I love being on a Lou Lamoriello team for it because he's just like, it's so bizarre that he's like painted as the kind of prototypical, like what an NHL executive looks like. The dude's 81. Nobody else is close to that in the NHL front office circles. So like I've just tried to enjoy the ride of it. Absolutely has his flaws and his faults, and I think his over loyalty is probably causing the Islanders more problems than it's helping to solve right now. But I can't get enough of the guy. I honestly can't. He cracks me up.
And I mean, my favorite thing is that we were fretting about Matt Barzal leaving, and he signs a year early. Like that. That's awesome. Like that to me is just the greatest thing ever. And I don't know what Matt Barzal's ceiling might be. He might retire an Islander and be like, you know what? Turns out he wasn't as good as we all hoped, but I don't care. Like that guy's here for another. He's already been here for what, 6 years, and he's going to be here for 8 more. And I don't care. Like it's good. I get to watch 14 years of Matt Barzal. Sweet. That's awesome.
I remain that Matthew Barzal is an elite talent.
Sure.
I think so
he's
too. Just not. He's not well equipped, and I've been banging this drum forever. One of you, I forget who, mentioned Nick Ehlers earlier. I'm like, that's another guy who, if you just put him on Barzal's left or right, let those two speed demons go to work and see what happens. It's just it hasn't happened for the Islanders. We'll see what happens with a full year of Horvat, but even after that trade, they still need a guy.
Right. I am totally on the Alex DeBrincat train, by the way. I
think 100%.
That's the guy. 100%. Put him with Barzal and just
yes. 240 goals, 2-time 40 goal scorer. Like, and he played with the guy who, by the way, Matthew Barzal idolized growing up, Patrick Kane. Get that friggin' guy. I don't care if you have to sell. I might get my head chopped off for this, but if you have to sell Noah Dobson to get Alex DeBrincat, go friggin' do it.
I mean, I might be convinced. I don't know. I wouldn't like it, but maybe I would.
The way that Dobson ended the season, I mean, he's still so young. I mean, I think they're
so, but so is
young.
DeBrincat.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get 30, 40 goals a season next to Barzal, who's going to get 70, 80 assists, and Horvat's going to be able to net 30, 40, like a lot of teams, you can outscore your problems.
Yeah.
And if they can get more defensive defensemen that way, and you still need to get the puck up. The forwards can't get the puck, and that's kind of the problem, right? You're not getting the puck through the neutral zone, and you're just banging your head against the wall all game. And they tried. They were stretching the zones more than I have kind of ever seen them do it, and it just was not clicking. Mike, I do have a question for you, because you seem very emotionally attached to this group. Do you believe in them as much as you love them?
No,
kind of
absolutely not. but at the same time, I believe in like hockey, like a team of the Islanders level, especially with the goalie they have, can absolutely do something in this sport. Like next year, if you kind of just look ahead to like the betting odds for next year, there's no clear favorite in the NHL for the first time in probably 5 years. Like it's going to be a league of parity again. It was very chalky for a few years. I don't think the division's getting better. If you go team by team in the Metro, the Devils, sure, like they look like they're kind of going to end up doing what Carolina has done for the last 5 years and just be that kind of consistent regular season team, and they'll try to answer the questions in the playoffs. Then everybody else below them, the Hurricanes don't have any goalies right now. Like they have no goalies. They have Kochetkov, and he's he's looked good at times. He looks like an absolute maniac. The Rangers, question marks all up and down that roster. Like they fired Gerard Gallant, and there's so much talk about how that playing group didn't like the way that he coached, and they just hired him with a different version of Gerard Gallant, basically, right? Like it's not like him and Peter Laviolette are very different in the way they approach the sport. Do you think the Penguins are going to be good? no, I don't. They have a lot of problems. Of course, you know, our friends up north in the greater Toronto area would tell me that they're going to be great because they got the best general manager in any sport running the show. But are they going to be better? There's nothing to tell me yes right now.
They might not have a goalie either. Jari is a UFA.
They got 82 games out of Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby last year. Like, are they going to get that again? Probably not. Like, that's why I think like the Islanders are they're in a tricky spot because the roster is certainly not good enough when you look around the elite teams of the NHL. But you just don't need to be an elite team, I don't think, in this division next year. And I don't think you need to be one even in the Eastern Conference. I think the kind of we're going to see a little bit of a shift back to what it was when the Kings and the Blackhawks were running the show in the NHL, and the Western Conference was just so much better than the East. And then it switched, and now we think it's going to go back the other way. And I think if the Islanders have, you know, a marginally better season than they did this year, we're talking about a team that could absolutely be a bear to deal with in the playoffs with their goalie.
And that's what's interesting to me is you mentioned the goalie, and you know, he doesn't have to sign a contract this summer, but he can. And Lou's traditionally, you know, done that kind of thing. Pelech, Pulock, Barzal. Do they sign this guy and do this summer, and do they sign him long term? Like, does Lou believe that signing Horvat and Barzal long term should lead to Sorokin being signed long term?
I think they will. And I think they're just going to, because Varlamov, again, is a free agent. So they'll just sign, they'll give Sorokin whatever money they were going to give Varlamov, and maybe give him a series to tell him, like, hey, you can come back. We want you to have it back. We love you, but you have to take a serious pay decrease. And if he doesn't want it, that's fair. And he can go someplace else, and they'll find somebody else to back up for that little bit. But I see no reason why. I mean, again, this is the guy who rode Marty Brodeur for 50 years in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't he do that? So, and as Mike and I talked about in last our mailbag episode at our Patreon yesterday, Ilya Sorokin doesn't seem like the kind of guy to get into like a bidding war and kind of like, you know, start to play all the angles, have his agent kind of be his attack dog and try and get every little dollar at. He seems like a guy that if Lou went, here's our deal, he'd probably be like, okay, and he just sign it, you know, and that's it. If he likes it here, he's got his bros with him, it's fine. And so I don't see any issues in getting him signed. And, you know, whether it happens in September, in November, in, you know, February, who knows? But I think but well before it expires, they'll probably just re-sign him.
And this is what Lou's been the best at in his time with the Islanders too, is like getting these contracts done and at a reasonable price. So even going back to Eberle and Nelson when he in those extensions done, I mean, I can still remember where I was when Nelson signed. I was in my parents' house in like a side room with all my stuff packed and just like scrolling Twitter, and people were like, they gave that money to Brock Nelson, and they should have done that. They should have given that to Kevin Hayes. I'm like, what on earth are these people smoking? And then and it ended up being one of the best kind of value contracts of this kind of 5-year window. So I trust. This is, you know, the old devil saying, like, in Lou we trust. I don't trust Lou for a lot of different things, but one thing that I definitely trust him with is this exact situation, like getting this goalie signed at a good number.
You're a numbers guy, Mike. What does that AAV start with? What number?
God, I hope it's like 9 or less, but I think it's going to come in a lot lower than people expect, because that's what Lou's been able to do. Like when he signed Pelech and Pulock, everyone's like, damn, like those numbers are you know, $1.5 million less than what people thought. And you can even go to, like I said, to the Nelson and Eberle ones. When he's gotten these deals done, it's the numbers come in and they don't break the bank at all. I mean, even Beauvillier, when he signed, I remember people being like, will it be 6? Like, of course not. Like, this is not going to be, this is not a $6 million player, and Lou Lamoriello's not going to let it get to $6 million. And so he hasn't extended, I don't think, an Islander at a terrible number yet, outside of, you know, you like Ross Johnston, right? Like, we know that Ross Johnston shouldn't be on a one-way contract.
Well, I mean, Lee's is a little bit,
Lee,
like, you know,
but I don't think it's there yet. Like, we don't. It's not. It has, like, he scored 28 goals last year, and whatever. Like,
and we love Anders Lee. Like, we just love.
And he's the
guy.
captain, and he's
Right.
and he was right before July 1st too. Like,
yes, exactly.
He wasn't the year before. So these are the kind of situations where you just trust them with the numbers, and I don't know. But I will tell you, like, the longer it goes past July 1st, I'm gonna absolutely be an absolute wreck.
So you don't think that number starts where Andre Vasilevsky starts?
No, I would be shocked. Like, I think you just have to look around the league, and there's like a case to be made that signing goalies to those tickets just is not a good idea. And I guess maybe they could say, well, the cap's going up or whatever, but like Bobrovsky, Carey Price, those contracts are just historically not good bets. And look, if he says, like, I want to be paid $1 more than Andre Vasilevsky, I'd be like, all right, fuck it, just do it. I don't care. But that's not what I think is going to end up.
Right.
Yeah.
To pause on the goalies a little bit longer, based on what we saw from Sorokin in the playoffs, and I don't want to put all of the blame on him, but can or should he be playing around 60 games every season? And how much more important does Varlamov or whatever backup goalie the Islanders are able to sign, how much more important are they to the team?
This is my biggest unanswered question of this year, is why Varlamov didn't play more. Like, if he was hurt, they should have said he was hurt, he wasn't 100%, and we'd be like, oh, okay, because I don't get it. Like, the guy he was still pretty, like, the year before he was bad. Like, he didn't really play that well. He kind of straightened himself out towards the second half, but like this year he looked much better, and he just didn't play. And like, you know, Sorokin has a Vezina Trophy caliber season, so I can't complain too much. But I do wonder, like, why was Varlamov not playing more than he was? Even, you know, another 8 games, 10 games would have really made that much of a difference. Maybe, you never know. But I don't know. That's my big question. And again, Varlamov is another key. Here we are talking about the team needing change. We get into this trap all the time. They need to change. They need to move on. And it's like, well, you know, I would bring him back if they could, because he likes it here, and he's buddies with Sorokin. So, you know, I don't want to see what do we talk about all the time? Arundel, Eric, who's the other guy? Eric Comrie. Like, I don't want to see
Big
guys.
Save Dave, right?
Yeah,
like,
Dave Rittich. Like, I don't want to see these guys play for the Islanders because I don't know them, you know. So, but that being said, if Varlamov wants some more money from someplace else, hey, dude, like, what are you gonna do? You know, we'll bring in somebody for $750K and hope that he doesn't, you know, have his feet fall off at some point. So, you know, that's about all you can really do. But I do wonder why Varlamov, you know, he finally looked like himself again, and he just didn't play. I thought that was kind of weird. So I don't know. Yeah, we'll probably never find out. But
I think the answer that they would give is like, we had no margin for error. Like, every game was must win, and we just went with the best option. And
right,
whether we agree or disagree with that, like it was bizarre because if I'm remembering correctly, he had that shutout. Varlamov, was it in Winnipeg? And then like just didn't play for 2 weeks, and we were like, all right, like he's in good form. Like they'll probably give him one of these next couple games, and it just didn't happen. But I want him back just because I can't deal with a Joey McDonald, you know, like Jan Denis kind of thing again. Like the Islanders goaltending carousel, I think there's a ton of new Islander fans because they were good the past, you know, half decade or so, and that's a great thing. But like the early part of the 2010s and the late part of the like the first decade of the aughts, like how many goalies did we have? It was bizarre.
Too many.
Like
it was 7 or 8 in one season.
Was that?
Wasn't it 7 or 8 in one season?
Yeah, there was one. Yeah, it was that was like the Mikko
Koskinen
and Anders Nilsson,
Al Montoya.
Like, it was like the Islanders have maybe the most stable goaltending situation of any team in the NHL the past, I don't know.
Al Montoya.
Exactly. And that is not to be taken for granted, and I just want to keep it kind of going. And I like Dan, like who's out there that's a better option than Varlamov?
No, yeah.
That's exactly it. Out of the UFA options, he's easily the best one.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think the Islanders are going to catch a break too with the way the market sets up, where he's going to fly under the radar because you know, Hellebuck, people are going to want Hellebuck, they're going to want Saros, they're going to want Anderson. Like there's Freddie Anderson's out there, like there are other guys, Gibson, like Varlamov kind of gets screwed a little bit, and because if the Islanders had traded him last trade deadline, his value was so high because there wasn't really any good other
Yeah.
goaltending options out there. And the same with the past UFA class, I believe. Like had the Islanders traded in the summer, there was not many options, but this time there are. So he could fly under the radar.
Yeah. John, I think I said this to you last week. I think the number of starts that Sorokin should make in a season starts with a 5 because I look at the recent history of how it went down in Dallas. Jake Ottinger played the same amount of games as Sorokin. I think he experienced that burnout. He did not look like his regular season self.
Yeah,
in the
his playoffs were not great. Yeah,
not great,
exactly
right?
That's exactly why I bring it up. And then Florida too, right? You want to be able to go back and forth with some of these goalies and just you have to ride the hot hand. The Bruins, right? With the mistake that they made, you just rode the cold hand because they just went with their guy and they just try the other one. The Oilers too, with I can't remember their goalies. They're
Campbell and Skinner.
Right. They just played Skinner. Meanwhile, Campbell was marginally better, but marginally better. And maybe that he only played a few games, but maybe that makes a difference. And just not being able to go back and forth for the Islanders to just solely rely on he was tired in this series against Hurricanes. You can tell those overtime goals were
rough. That's the one. The last one especially. It's just like really?
And that's the way it happens in the playoffs, right? That's the way those goals are scored, but even still it was so out of character for him.
Yeah.
You almost never saw that from Sorokin.
No, and that's why this is a 2 goaltender NHL. Nowadays, you need 2 viable options to play for your team, 1A, 1B, or starter backup, whatever the situation is. You need 2, and without 2 goaltenders, I mean, look at the Golden Knights. They needed friggin' 4, and they're about to win the Stanley Cup.
Robin Leonard is still on their books somewhere.
Robin Leonard is right. So and
Robin Leonard and Jonathan Quick are on their on their team, and neither of them are playing.
And neither of them are playing. Right. Robin Leonard somewhere taking care of his snake farm, I think.
Of all teams, though, the Islanders should know that better than anybody.
Right. Yeah.
Right. They were. I don't want to say they were at the forefront of the tandem, but they were. Yeah. They truly just dove into that philosophy, and then Sorokin in his second full season,
kind of took.
I think he got a little tired. They were getting outshot almost every single night. I don't know how you just kind of continue to do that. I've been screwing around with the order of our questions and things because we're jumping all over the place. But I think we're kind of in this spot where if they're going to run this back, right, based on what Lamoriello said, if they're going to run this team back, what does that mean? Because there's clearly room for change. Josh Bailey, you really don't know about Scott Mayfield. Can they afford him? Clutterbuck and Martin, I had the feeling that fourth line's going to stay together. What does moving on or any kind of change actually look like? Because from where I sit, and Mike, I think you said this earlier, Lamoriello has been really good at signing his own guys, but he's also been really good at trades. And this offseason, the UFA class is not good. And with his propensity for trades and doing, I think, quite well for the most part, is this the summer of Lou? Is this it? Like, would we actually, if there was ever a time to start doing some stuff, is this kind of the moment where Lou can get it to happen?
I would love it. From an excitement standpoint, and I know that's hypocritical because I say I don't want to lose any of these guys, but at the same time, like when they traded Anthony Beauvillier, I was really sad for, like, I could kind of separating, like, compartmentalize my emotions, which is like gonna miss this guy and whatever, but at the same time, I was really excited about just them doing something and kind of splashing some water in the face of a fan base that really needed it. And I wouldn't be shocked if Lou ends up, this is like that summer of Lou. Dan and I talk about all the time. Like when he was running the Devils, his reputation couldn't be more different from what it is now. Like his reputation was the guy who broke the law, the NHL law, signing Ilya Kovalchuk. Like he had to pay a draft pick to sign, when they signed Ilya Kovalchuk. And they were making trades. He was firing coaches at the end of seasons. He coached the Devils.
He coached
the way Dublowitz came. He was coaching them. Like this is a guy he was batshit. He was batshit crazy.
And the team was good. Like,
weren't
they in first place or something?
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that the Islanders are so comfortable, it seems like, is hilarious when you consider what his reputation was back then and now what it is now. But I think there is room to do it, especially when they find a way to get Bailey's contract off the books. And it does. I'm starting to change my thinking on the Bailey trade. I used to think like it was going to cost the Islanders a lot to get the full $5 million off, but I don't know if it's really going to anymore, because there's some teams that could really use that deal and use that player and won't care about paying $3.5 million or whatever his actual salary is. And he could go to a decent situation, I think, and maybe it'll cost like a 5th round pick or something.
Yeah.
But once they are able to do that, I think then stuff can open up, because like you said, the free agent class is an absolute disaster. So it looks like an expansion draft, like from the Blue Jackets Wild era. Like, here's the guys you could pick from. Good luck building a team around Dmitry Orlov. Great player, but you can't really call him like a stud. And I think that plays to Scott Mayfield's benefit. So whereas the Islanders are going to kind of benefit if they want to bring back Varlamov at a cheap deal, they won't be able to do it with Mayfield, because his number is going to be crazy, considering he's probably the best right shot defenseman out there, I think, after Orlov. But so I think the best path to improvement and most logical one is via trade. And it seems like a lot of teams are ready to kind of nuke things in their own locker rooms, whether it's Calgary, Winnipeg, going down the list, like Nashville. I think there's some teams that are kind of sick of the guys they have. The Leafs even, like there's some kind of options out there. And if Lou Lamoriello from 2007 shows up, then that'll be fun.
I'm sick of the guys the Leafs have too. So I'm extremely sick of those guys.
Well, I was waiting for this. The core 4. Let's dive in. No, that's nauseating.
Yeah, no thanks. But yeah, the UFA class is kind of weird, and it's a lot of older guys. Like, I'm looking at Cap Friendly here, and it's like Killorn, good player, he's 33. Kane's out for a long time, he's 34. Krejci, him and Bergeron are both 37. Forget them. But like, JT Compher is 28, which is not old, but it's like, he's 28. Really? Seriously? Tarasenko is 31. Tatar is 30. Like, these guys, Zucker is 31. Gostisbehere is 30. Halla is 30. These are a lot of Devils on here. Jeez, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, James, you already knew that. So like, there's a lot of, I see this as like a potential minefield. Like, I don't, some of these guys could be useful. Tarasenko, I think in particular, could be pretty useful, but like, how many years are we talking about? Like, if he wants 5 years, that's too much. Like, I don't, there's nobody here I think that's going to get, that deserves, not that he deserved it, but like, no, there are no Andrew Ladd specials in here, like the 6x6 or 6x5 or whatever it was. But all it takes is one stroke of a pen, and then one of these guys becomes that guy, right? So hopefully that doesn't happen. And so, yeah, I'm with you guys. Like, I feel like a trade makes the most sense, but then of course you got to find a place for them to go. And like Mike said before, like Lou, people don't realize this outside of us because they don't pay attention to the Islanders, but like, this guy takes care of players in a way that is really unique and maybe not always was always the case, but like, he's helping Jordan Eberle again. He's calling the governor of Washington to like get him a work visa to play for an expansion team. Like, that's kind of crazy. And like, all these guys, even Josh Ho-Sang, has nothing bad to say about Lou Lamoriello after all the things that they went through. So like, I don't think he just wants to dump him off on some nowhere team. I remember
Arizona.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I remember, because when I was an intern for Stan Fischler, they traded Bill Guerin to Edmonton, and I believe they also traded John McClain to San Jose. And those were like, that you might as well have been stationed in Siberia. Like, nobody wanted to play for either of those two teams. They were nowhere, and he just wanted, because they were both contract, impasses, get rid of them. And like, to dump John McClain on the San Jose Sharks after all he did for the Devils was insane to me. But that Lou is. This ain't the same guy, and so I think he would move Josh Bailey if he could, but he's not just gonna like you said, dump him on Arizona or whatever. Like, if he can find a spot for him, Yeah, like Andrew. Well, yeah. Well,
Right.
he's a different thing. So, but I do think
yeah, there might be one guy who has bad things to say.
Yeah,
about
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
But their salary cap situation is so kind of tight that I think they need to make a trade. Like even if they sign somebody, they're gonna have to trade somebody.
And it's well stated what you said about how Lou takes care of his guys too, because even when Matthew Barzal agreed to his contract, he was so complimentary of how Lou does business, and he said, when I'm not a player anymore, I want to be in the front office. I want to be like Lou.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is, a couple of things. One, I think he's trying to say, hey, other free agents come here. But two, I think he actually meant it. Lou takes care of his own. And I think that it does go a long way in certain aspects. It also hurts him in other aspects. And so I could understand both sides of the coin there, for Lou.
It's one of the things that why I've really kind of come to love Lou is like the hate that he gets from folks, not Islander fans as much, like the very, very online hockey media types. They paint him as he's like this dinosaur because of the beard thing or whatever. Like you ask any of the players, they're just like, no, I love this guy. Like
it doesn't matter.
I'll shave my beard for him till the day I die because like and like these people are, oh my god, like he's basically like putting them in shackles and all this stuff. Like, no, they all love him.
Very old and very bald, and online doesn't like either one.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
He's in trouble.
And so they like project on him. They project this kind of like image on him, and I'm like, why not listen to the people who are there, like who are actually there, instead of like
imagine that
playing our own kind of cosplay of I'm running the New York Islanders, like I'm gonna let Adam Pelech grow a beard. I don't care if he grows a beard. Like, it's bizarre the way that he's been painted, and by people who don't know him, because he famously doesn't talk to anybody. Like nobody knows, nobody sees him. This is Long Island. Like you see people all the time. Like it's not hard to, if I wanted to go run into an Islander tomorrow, I probably could. I would just drive around, Garden City or Manhasset or whatever. Nobody ever sees Lou. It's crazy.
Dude, Oliver Wahlstrom was at the Belmont Stakes. Like he was just some dude in a hat hanging out. Like that was it.
So going back to what the team can do, I think there's a specific player that I want to make sure that we touch on, because I think it kind of jams up the roster a little bit. I don't really see that many opportunities unless they truly move on from Martin and Clutterbuck as well. And you can move down some players in the lineup, like a Parise and a Fashing. Yes, James, in the front row.
I have a tidbit on moving on from Martin and Clutterbuck. If they do, there's a player in the free agency pool who I think they should go after, who brings a similar style. He's younger and he is very fast. And I covered him all year. Miles Wood, I think, is a perfect fit to play on the fourth line for the Islanders, to kind of recreate that fourth line magic. I didn't want to lose that thought. I wanted to plug it in somewhere. Felt like the opportunity.
It's interesting because I think you and I have talked about how Lee should probably be pushed down to the third line to play with Peugeot and Wahlstrom.
I agree.
And that means it's a Parise, Cizikas, Fashing fourth line, which I happen to really like.
Yeah.
That leaves two spots on the roster, more or less, on the top two lines as wingers. And if you bring Engvall back, and I'm curious our thoughts on that, that leaves one spot. And that's the big trade. Are you trading a roster player? You need a defender too. Making an upgrade means you're doing like a Beauvillier for Horvat, like a one for, like, what is that? You're not trading Palmieri for anybody. No one on the roster is going to necessarily get you back unless it's Wahlstrom, which 5 goals in 37 games is not screaming giant return, unless you're trading a future first along with him. Or a prospect and a future first. So like, I'm curious first on Engvall and what you think that number would be if they do want to bring him back. And if they do, then you're just aiming at simply one spot on the roster that you're trading for, at least on the forward group.
Yeah. I mean, I want him back. That'd be great. But at what, it depends on how much he wants. And like, he was making what, $3 million, I think, last year, something like that. So, I don't know. It depends on what he wants. I got to give him credit. He was pretty cagey in his remarks after the season was over. So he didn't really tip his hand either way. And, but yeah, that's the thing. It's like, if if they bring him back and they trade Bailey, then you've got an extra spot. I'm all for, here we're talking about Varlamov playing more games. I'm here for Martin and Clutterbuck playing maybe some less, working somebody else. If it's not a free agent like a Miles Wood, who makes a lot of sense, put Fasching there. I mean, Fasching's perfect for that spot when he's back. So, would it suck to see Pierre Engvall, a guy who wasn't an Islander 6 months ago, leave in free agency? Yeah, a little bit, but I think they would get over it. I think, what my fear with him is that he goes and plays in Arizona and he scores 30 goals.
No, someone's got to score.
He's the new Carter Verhaeghe, basically, kind of like that sort of scenario. That would really suck. But
this was the best that he's played though, consistently. Yeah. So I think that's where are you betting on that?
Right.
Like 4x4 is too expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Are you doing like a prove me 2-year deal?
Yeah.
And maybe pay him, maybe pay him that 4, but only do it for 2 years. I can deal with that for 2 years. Right. Yeah. I just don't know what after that. I'm not
That's the
sure.
thing. And then it gets into, like you were saying before, about Parisi and whether or not he even comes back. And we all love Zach. We all want him back. I would not want to play in New York while my family lived in Minnesota. I hate having to work in the city while my family's in New Jersey. It's very just like that. So it's funny that, here we are talking about these guys who really are very useful players, but they're not like sort of game-breaking talents. And, do we want them back? Yeah, because we like them. But, at the same time, if they can upgrade in those spots, they should do that.
And that second line was certainly,
oh my God, yeah,
more than the sum of their parts to a T, right?
Yes.
It was. I mean, Nelson notwithstanding, almost 40-goal guy, but the line itself was what you want to recreate.
Sure.
And was it lightning in a bottle, or was there something there?
Right.
That's I think a huge question mark. And if you're going to bet on that and then tie up cap space, yikes. That's where I get a little iffy there.
Yeah, and it's the jamming up of a roster spot that gives you a little agita, like, because you really don't, like you said, you have like one shot at upgrading this, giving this forward group the shot in the arm, and if you sign Engvall, which I would totally be okay with them doing, that means that the margin for error becomes thinner. Finding the right fit, you'll have less cap space to work with. You have one less spot on the wing to work with. So it's an interesting question to ask, because like he was really good, and I think one of the reasons that I felt he looked a more complete hockey player than he did in Toronto, and unfortunately I watched way too much Maple Leafs hockey over the past 5 years, and listened to way too many Maple Leafs podcasts, and watched too many Maple Leafs YouTube videos and whatever. I know a lot about Pierre Engvall and why people were okay with him being traded. It's because he's not, this kind of blood and guts type player. You're talking about some of, being greater than the sum of your parts. Like, as a player in Toronto, he wasn't. Just his physical tools. You're looking at the guy, you're like, he is an absolute specimen. He's like incredibly good looking. He's got an incredible shot. He's fast. He's got that long reach. And you look at him like a
giraffe.
Yeah, you're like, this guy. If you were casting a hockey movie, and you're like, okay, who's going to be like the silky smooth superstar on this team where the underdog plays like with him and needs to get his attitude to change. You'd cast the guy who looks like Pierre Engvall. But the Islanders have everything that Pierre Engvall doesn't have twice over, right? Like, they already have guys who will go murder you and your loved ones to win a puck battle in the corner, right? Like, Pierre Engvall might not do that, but
playing with Palmieri,
yeah,
that he's a guy that he's a little more crash and bang than I think we all hope.
Nelson's like not afraid to do that either.
No. Yeah, just down the roster, like you send those guys out after a team just faced Clutterbuck, Martin, and Cizikas for a minute and a half. Like, it doesn't matter if Pierre Engvall is just gonna reach for a puck in the corner. On the Maple Leafs, like, that team was dragged through the streets because they are guys who don't do that. Like, that's their biggest problem, is that, right? Like, so in a way, like, the Islanders almost needed a quote unquote soft player on this roster. Like, they were kind of begging for like a guy who wasn't going to go throw his face into the glass to win a,
Yeah.
That's
to win a
that's
puck,
a
right?
good point.
It really is.
That's
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Because I was saying to John, my worry is that Lou signs this guy to, let's say it is 4x4, but the only way he can do that is by getting rid of Bailey's contract.
Right.
It's essentially a wash if it doesn't work out for
Right.
Engvall. And now you're in the same conundrum that you've been in for years.
It's a bet. Yeah, it's a bet.
The younger
it feels like
Swedish
it
Josh
shouldn't
Bailey.
be a bet. Like when you're re-signing a player like that, like for Sorokin, for example, it's not a bet. Like you're doing it. Like it's the right decision to make when you're bringing a guy back.
Yeah.
You want it to be like that, like a very straightforward thing. With Engvall, it's a bet to bring him back, and I can see it going very well. But I also think like his floor is pretty high. Where like if you do sign him, the worst case scenario is probably you end up with a like for like switch with Josh Bailey, which none of us want. It won't excite anybody, but it's not the worst situation.
Not a $4 million. If he's signing on for 2.5, like he was, I think he was at 2.5 last season.
Yeah.
Sure, but $4 million. I mean, you sit there and you say,
you
man,
take the Dying Islander special, right? Like the Suzuki's 2.5,
right? Yeah,
6 or whatever.
If they can get him for 2.8, then I would be like, that's awesome. That's Lou Lamoriello hockey baby.
Yeah,
give him that $300,000.
2.8. I'm thinking 3.25 by 3.
All right, yeah. So
take it. Yeah,
so he gets a little bit of an increase if Parise doesn't come back, which I think is a mistake.
I think Parise's coming back.
But my fingers are crossed. That's a guy that if there ever was an Islander,
right,
he just is bleeding blue and orange, and just the way that they want to play, scoring 20 goals a season, or 17 goals 2 years ago. I keep saying last season, 2 years ago, 21 this year. I think with Cizikas and Fasching, that would be a hell of a line.
Yeah. Also, can't you just see Zach Parise like joining the Islanders front office? Like, am I the only one who kind of sees that? Like,
no.
Scout or guy who shows up at practice, like kick pucks around, something like that. Like,
100%.
Move your family to the island, but that would be kind of a thing. I could see that. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we talk about this all the time. We've never seen a guy never play for the Islanders for 15 years and then come and be an Islander. Like he just fits here. Like every time he takes to the ice, I want to shed a tear. Like I just love this guy so much. And he's only been here for 2 years, and he's played great. And that's another bet too. Like if he's like, you know what, I thought about it and I'm coming back. That's great. Is he going to score 21 goals at 39 years old? I don't know. Like,
I think he was going to score 21 last year.
So right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But there's so much value there beyond the goal. I think that was
exactly. Yeah.
What they needed. And they needed him as to be a goal scorer, but he should be cherry on top, 9, 11, 12 goals and be on the penalty kill and this and that and add value that way and not be dependent on to make sure that he scores 20 goals as one of the few players that does it.
And he's only going to make $750K. Like he ain't making. There's no need to sign him for more than that. So
for the last 2 years, I think he's been the best value contract per point in the league. So you take that guy back 10 out of 10 times if he's coming back.
And like John said, like there is a spot for him on this roster, and it's the Cizikas, Fasching, Parise line.
Right.
Unfortunately,
and believe it or not,
that spot isn't open. Like it's like Fasching and Cizikas were great together.
100%. And believe it or not, he's like after Barzell, the fastest guy on the team. They don't have speed and they need it. So it like what
did Lou lie to us and say the other day? He was like, we don't have fast guys, but our team is fast.
It's about playing
fast.
Okay. Not being fast.
It's
okay, sure.
You know what? I read that. I thank you for bringing that up because we did not talk about that last week. Because I kept seeing more and more come out about the press conference after I kept reading about it. I was very surprised. I'm like, where are these quotes coming from? I feel like I didn't hear this, but I did want to talk about that because I said that before where they really tried to stretch the ice more. Did you believe that? I know you're like making a joke about it, but like, did you believe that they're able to play fast at all?
I mean, I get where he's coming from because I've said this before on anxiety too. Like the Kings, that's how they played when they won their 2 cups. They were not a fast team, but they were able to get the puck up the ice quickly to guys that could score. Obviously, Kopitar and Carter and Richards and those guys. And so I get what Lou is saying. I just don't agree with him that the Islanders are that fast. And this is where, to me, like, we spend a lot of time talking about the forwards because they're like kind of like the glory guys. They do a lot of scoring, but I'm a big believer in that they need more guys on the back end who can move the puck faster. Because this is, we talk about it. Dobson took a step back. This is where he took the biggest step back. And this is where the big problems come in, is that and this is 2 years in a row they couldn't do this too, because the first year they had Chara, they couldn't move the puck fast enough up the ice to the forwards, who can score when given the chance, but they just never are. And obviously Pelech and Pulick are more kind of defensive oriented guys, and Mayfield just isn't that type either. So they need more people like that. They don't have them. And I disagree with Lou with what he said, but I do get what he's saying. And I feel like if they, had defensemen that can move the puck faster to the same slow-ish forwards, they'd be okay, basically.
Yeah, if only they had someone like Devin Tays, right?
All right, let's not get crazy now.
Nassibin Hockey is brought to you by DraftKings. Light the lamp during the hockey playoffs with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers can make a $5 bet and score $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelpma.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPENY or text HOPENY. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/hockey terms.
Where my seats were at UBS Arena, like I'm behind the goal and up in the gods where the Islanders shoot twice. Like there were a couple games, and the Maple Leafs game was one where they just kicked the shit out of the Leafs towards the end of the season, and Islander fans were painted like pariahs because they were still booing John Tavares. And like that team, I was like, this team is flying. Like they are flying tonight. And there were games like that where I was watching them and cracking up to myself because they looked fast, and that was once every couple of games, maybe. So what they weren't consistently flying at all last season, and I think that is because of the roster construction, which has over-indexed on guys who like to bang more than they like to skate, and the fact that we talked about Zach Parise being one of the fastest guys on the team kind of tells you where they're at, and
along with Engvall.
Engvall. That's why he works so well, right? Like he showed up, and we were like, "What the hell is that thing? That guy is flying." And Aho had a really nice season, and it probably looked better than it was because of his skill set compared to the guys he plays with. But they just need that. This team is desperately crying out for someone who can just. It's going to sound sick when I say this, but they kind of desperately needed someone like Andy Green last year, who wasn't fast, but what can Andy Green do is he can move the puck fast and he can move it to the right spot.
Yes.
That's a good point.
That's all he did was he'd make an 8-foot pass to someone's breaking out on the slot and through the slot of their own zone. And guess what? The Islanders are on a 3-on-2 or a 3-on-3, or they have an easy out. They just didn't have that guy last year. And it crushed them. It crushed them so often. And Pelech, like his kind of Andy Greenness didn't show up towards the end of the year, especially in the playoff series. Like he used to be really good at making those safe outlet passes, and it felt like he wasn't at all towards down the stretch. So they just need that guy. Whether it's someone who can skate the puck out like an Aho, or someone who can just make that first simple breakout pass like Nate Schmidt or someone like that. Like they're crying out for it.
Nick Leddy.
I'm
just kidding.
Yeah.
And then when you have when you have Diet Devin Taves and Sebastian Aho, who likes to skate the puck more than pass it out of the zone, and then the forwards, I don't know, go blank. They don't know where to go.
Yeah.
Even though presumably they're practicing just zone exits and getting the puck up the ice very quickly, they just couldn't carry that momentum into the offensive zone.
Yeah.
And on occasion they're they were a very energetic team. Like to your point, that they came out and they're just flying, and that was their, really going back and before we hit record, Dan, you and I were talking about the 2013 little playoff, hardly a run, but the playoff series against
then it was a run. That qualified as a run.
Oh man, we were sprinting. But against the Penguins, that was the and then going in the early part of the series anyway in 2015, and really starting in 2013, it was that energy. They were just wave after wave, and they were just on top of you. They didn't really know what to do after they had the puck, but god damn it, they were going to get it. Well, and it's now they could probably do something with it, but they don't have the energy to get it back.
That's the Nick Leddy. When I'm here, I am joking again about Nick Leddy, but like that to me was always Nick Leddy. Like he was a guy who could, more than any other defenseman, take that puck from his own end, skate it deftly into the other end like nobody's business, and then the puck would just die because nobody knew what he wanted to do. Nobody knew what else to do with it. And it would just sort of end up, and maybe they could start to cycle it, maybe get the forecheck going, and it would work. But like, how many times do we see Nick Leddy carry the puck, 150 feet, and then nothing happens? And so it's like, you just be like, man, if they could just get a guy to be on the same wavelength with this guy, they would really have, chemistry. Michael Grabner was another one. I mean, we used to watch Michael Grabner fly up and down the ice, and then he would get a breakaway and miss. Like it became a running gag, right? Like.
They just need to. They need to. It's really funny because you think of this team as a group that really does work as a team,
right?
But they don't work together and pass the puck and move up the ice in unison.
Yeah.
And watching the end of Ted Lasso, and it's like the total football thing. Like you need everybody to kind of do their thing. And I'm not saying abandon position names or anything, but they're not moving up the ice together. And this is especially true. Carrying the puck up the ice clearly doesn't work. Example, Matt Barzal.
Yeah.
He's the only one that does that.
Right.
And this is where it doesn't work.
And this is my problem with Lee. And I love Anders Lee again. They have to find the right spot for him because him and Horvat didn't work. I don't even think him and Barzal really work either. We've seen how many seasons it is now. There's somewhere there's a tandem that will work with Anders Lee. He's too smart. He's too good. He can make it work, but it ain't either of those two guys, and I don't know who it is, but maybe
it's Pajot.
Maybe it's
Pajot and Wallstrom for sure. And that's the problem, and the team needs to adapt. And I think that's the coaching not pushing these players to do that. Sebastian, stop, pass the puck, take a few steps, take a look, pass the puck. Barzal, give and go, buddy. I said that to it's beer league. It's obviously not. I'm playing beer league at 10 o'clock on Thursdays, but there's a couple guys. There's a lot of young guys, and they're playing in a beer league, so they're getting frustrated just by the older guys being better than them. But I was like, dude, you're too good. You gotta just give the puck, skate, and go. Right? You're getting stopped every single time. You're trying to beat too many guys. This is simple. Your coach will tell you this.
Yeah.
Pass the and then as soon as he does that, he starts getting the puck up the ice, and he's feeling better. Barzal would do that. I don't know if there's a trust factor. He's not. No one's moving in the neutral zone. I think everyone's just like waiting for him to do something.
Yeah.
And
well, it's similar to what Dan was saying earlier about Nick Leddy. He skates the puck up the ice, and then play just dies because no one is there with him. The same thing happens with Barzal. No one's efficient enough of a skater on the line with him to start a rush. Yeah. And if they put a guy with speed next to Barzal, I mean, it feels like this crazy concept to me at this point, just because it hasn't happened for so many years. But it's really the simplest thing: give him somebody sufficient enough to skate alongside of him, and you'll see what happens. The puck
Look at all these guys puck watching, Brendan. Everybody's puck watching. Nobody's getting into the dirty areas.
Yeah. Think about Everly, who it worked. Like the two of them, I think it was, like you said, John, a trust factor where not only Barzal, but like the other team knows, okay, if Barzal dishes it to Everly, like we need to shift our focus that way because that guy can carry the puck into the zone and he's shifty and he can shoot. Whereas like with the way that team has been constructed lately, I like Bo Horvat's game a lot, but he's not that type of player. He's someone who's looking to be the finishing product rather than the guy who's helping build the play. So he needs that Everly type So I don't know who it is because it's not, that person's probably not on this roster. I mean, it is Brock Nelson. Like he's the only other player. Like I could think in my head. It was like, this guy is the only guy I trust, and I think Barzal would trust, and team defenses would be like, shit, like we're dealing with a legitimate line here, because if he gives the puck to Nelson, like that guy's dynamite on the rush. When Brock Nelson comes down the wing with the puck on his stick, I can go downstairs, get a glass of water and whatever, and I know I'm coming back and I'm going to be watching him getting a parade of handshakes down the Islanders bench, because he doesn't miss like those situations. So they just need to find that guy to play with him. So Barzal doesn't need to. I just don't want to watch it anymore. I love watching him fly through the neutral zone. Yeah. But then you just die on the inside when you see him pull up, and you're like, oh, shit, like, is he going to pass it to Matt Martin here, or is he going to just up the puck deep or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I've asked James this for years now. What does that player even look like with Barzal? Because is it Wallstrom? Is it this? Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, there's a lot of skill that you can certainly add there, but
it's the one type of player we haven't really seen play with him, right? Like, it's like another, almost like another Barzal, like another guy, and Eberle's kind of close to it. Like Eberle can move the puck on it, like in and out. Right. He's a dipsy doodler. Like, he's got great hands. We haven't seen Barzal play with like a guy like that. Like his you look at his line mates, you're like, Jesus Christ, this guy, man. Like he's I wonder who, if you went down from the moment he stepped on the ice with the Islanders the first time to the end of the season, who his most common line mates were. I think it would probably end up with Beauvillier and Lee.
I don't even know. Lee for sure, but
that's
I don't know
probably that's probably right. Maybe Kyle Palmieri a little bit.
I don't know, man. It's but like listen to the names we're saying, right? Like
right.
We're not saying any, we're not saying
second tier guys,
Brad or anybody, right? Like second tier guys. So
and that's been the problem. It's been a carousel in different spots on the roster, and now it's just come back to it's a first line problem again. It seemed like it was solved for a little bit. It was the third line. They get Peugeot. It seems to be fixed. It works for a little bit. They trade their first line. They hand Eberle away, whisking him off to an opposite coast, and then you're right back to that same problem that we had. I don't want to say solved, but at least it was a pretty good stopgap from Tavares, and then prior to him, and just who's playing on the first line. If it wasn't Tavares, it was Ziggy Palffy. Yeah, you can kind of just go down the line when it was just like, here's a guy in an island. And then for a second, it was two of them. Yeah. Oh my God, for a second, it was two of them. It was Tavares and it was Barzal, and you're like, holy shit. And then Josh Bailey just turns it on, and it's like 79 assists or like whatever, and 3 goals. And he's an all-star, and it's like, is this something? Is this a thing?
Right.
And then it very much wasn't a thing. And
this is what I say to you all the time. If they make the right acquisition, everyone gets knocked down a peg into the right place. Everything's in the perfect order. And then suddenly, yes, Josh Bailey's are scoring 71 points in a season. And you have a sufficient team on the ice. And to this point, like you said, it happened once where they had 2 really good guys in Tavares and Barzal, and that was Barzal's best season. He scored 85 freaking points. He was a point per game player. Right. And then he, John Tavares leaves, and what happens? He's no longer a point per game player, and everybody's wondering why. The answer is very simple. Yeah. he needs to be equipped.
Yeah. I'm on Natural Stat Trick right now, and if I'm not reading this incorrectly, Barzal spent the most times with Wallstrom and Bailey last season in the regular season.
Okay.
Like
and okay, so that's insane to me because Wallstrom got hurt in December, and he spent the most time with Wallstrom in December, meaning that from December on, his wingers were just a revolving door.
They were.
It's 17 games for the 3 of them, and then it's 5, 6, 6, 4, 4, 5.
God,
5 like,
and you want Wallstrom to be that guy, because Wallstrom has that shot that he could score 30. I've been saying that he can score 30 goals. Yeah. He just hasn't been able to show all the other tools to be able to handle that.
Yeah.
And nobody else.
Have 30 goals and 0 assists.
Yeah.
Correct.
Score 30 goals.
Right.
Exactly.
The best line of the year, by the way, and if you remember this line, you're a better fan than I am. We got 5 minutes and 4 seconds total last season. Matthew Barzal, Anders Lee, Nikita Soshnikov.
It's the play that I'll never forget. It was Sashnikov. Like, he's got a trademark Islanders play, and it was that turnover against Tampa Bay.
Right.
When the season ended 6 games in, because he couldn't see out the last 5 seconds of the second period against the Lightning, and that Sashnikov, my God.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say something ridiculous like Jan Kovar or something like
No,
that.
well, close enough, right?
Sashnikov's right there, yeah.
We got 5 minutes and 12 seconds of Barzell, Bailey, and William Dufour. So there you go.
Oh, my God. I
Future-
forgot
That was
about
another.
thing.
Oh my God, John. Go ahead. I know exactly what you're going to say, John. Go ahead. Go do
No,
it.
can we stop putting these players on a top line and be like, oh, they're not good.
Yeah.
The Dufour, Holmstrom,
Bellows.
Wallstrom, just keep putting these young guys on the guy who you can't find on your regular roster, someone to play with that's been a professional for years. What you do is put them in their very first games with the best player on your team, arguably, I don't know, top 10 or 15 in the league, and then wonder why it didn't work.
Right.
Over and over again.
against the best regular season team in NHL history.
That's
too.
right. Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Imagine being Patrice Bergeron and just going out there and being like, oh my God, this guy's first NHL game. This is how we're gonna eat this guy for breakfast. And they did. They did.
It wasn't Ratu,
And then-
it was Dufour, then it was
Right,
Sashnikov. It was like, are you kidding?
And then when a guy like Arnaud Durando comes up and actually shows
Holy
promise,
shit.
they demote him. And I'm like, what are we doing? What
How
are we
is he
doing?
not up in the playoffs? I'll never understand.
He showed the it factor, and clearly, look, the raw results weren't there. He didn't score and anything like that, but he had the speed. He was making plays. He looked really good out there. He wasn't a liability. I'm like, why is this guy not getting more of a chance? And I don't know how it might have worked out for this player too, but that kid Iskakov down in Bridgeport was just tearing it up.
Yeah. Yeah. He really good season.
What are we doing with that guy? Like, why didn't they give him a shot? Right.
Well, now they've signed guys like Maggio and
Right.
so maybe Ishkahov and them come up and again, this gets back to what we were talking about a while ago. Like, how many roster spots are we even going to have? And like, if they fill them with an Engvall, maybe they trade Bailey and fill that spot, and then the fourth line is still the same, and Hud Fashing is still here. Then those guys are going to spend another year in Bridgeport. And
the other thing too is we're talking about, can they make trades?
Right.
Well, do they have the assets? That's the big question too.
And that's what I kind of started the show with. I had no idea. Like, what are you're not dealing from a position of power. So you're going to trade Peugeot and Maggio for what? Like,
I don't.
Is that like, I'm saying, like you're kind of piecing together things like what value do you actually have without overpaying? That's the problem. If you're going to pay, you're giving up. You already did Ratu. Like, that already happened. You can't also then trade Dufour. You don't have a first this year. Again, is that 4 or 5 years in a row? You're getting lucky with some of them. You've been really bad developing forwards. You've done a decent job with defenders, but have not had a forward come out of there since Brock Nelson or Anders Lee. That's been, or Tzizikis and some of these guys have been around, but you're talking about like well over a decade ago at this point. What you don't have anything to then go get that players. That's why someone like DeBrincat, where it could be a prospect and a pick. Okay, I mean the guy's so young, you can get away with it. Right, that's not gonna hurt my feelings necessarily to kind of like.
But they're not beating any other offers. That's the problem.
That's the thing, yeah.
Oh no, 100%. I think that's a problem, and I think that's a good kind of. And we can continue the conversation. This is great, but my last actual question was: is this the last kick of the can? Like, I'm not even talking about Lou and anything like that, but going through knowing that if they can't trade Bailey, his contract's done after this year. Clutterbuck's contract's done after this year. Martin's contract's done. You have to make all these other signings. Are we looking at, and then Nelson will have only a year left after this year. No, Lee has 2 more after this.
I think
one or two.
He's got
so
2 more after this. Yeah.
So you're getting kind of to the end here where if there was a chance to really move on, it may actually be next year. So Lou may be, have his crystal ball and say, okay, these 1 or 3 years are just going to be what they are. And we have to deal with what we have until, cross our fingers, the cap goes up. Not at all confident in that. But then your own cap can go up if you can manage it correctly and only make your own quote bad signing in Engvall, keep the team together. I can't help but think it's the last true kick where next summer we're actually having a different conversation. I wanted to get some feedback on that.
It feels like it is.
That was very somber.
Yeah, but I also said that at like before last season. You know, I think everybody was kind of on the same page, like that this is it for these guys, and but it feels that way because of a couple, like the Martin Clutterbuck deals coming off the book means that guys like Fashing or and Parisi, I'm sure if he does come back, it'll be next year and that's it. Like it just feels like naturally the kind of supporting cast goes away, and who knows if Mayfield is even there this year too. So it does feel like the natural progression is coming. And the reason I am somber is because like you, John, and James, like the 2 runs to the conference final those were the best days of our lives as Islander fans. like that's so it's you know, it's a human thing to not want to see those guys go without like, it's going to kill me. Like Dan says, it's going to kill me that Josh Bailey goes this summer, because that means that Josh Bailey is not going to win a Stanley Cup with the Islanders, because I fully expect the Islanders to win Stanley Cup before every season, no matter how bad their roster looks. Like, I'm just like, this is the year, like, Islanders, start thinking about it. And when I do that this year, I'm going to have to do it without Josh Bailey. And then after next season, I'm going to have to do it without Matt Martin and Cal Clutterbuck. And then it gets hard. It was hard enough to say goodbye to like the Oposos and the Nielsen's and the Hammoniks. And then to have to do it with another core, like it's tough. Yeah. It's not easy. So wave. That's why that's why it's somber. And honestly, like I didn't think I would love a team more than I loved that group. And then one guy did something and changed everything about how I felt about them, and also how I felt about the guys that stuck around. And now I cannot fathom liking a group of Islanders more than I love these guys. And then in 8 years, I'll be saying that about the Ishkov,
right,
and Cal Delius's, and whoever. But like
Matthew Maggio era,
exactly. It's just how it is as a fan. Yeah. So, but I think the answer is yes, and it is probably the right thing too. But it's sad. Like it hurts.
I mean, for some guys, it's definitely the last kick at the can. Like you know, we've all had our ups and downs with the fourth line, but when Martin and let's assume that Martin and Clutterbuck hang it up after this next year, that's going to really suck. Like Mike and I were talking, we got a question about retired numbers on our mailbag podcast. And it wasn't until the end of the conversation where we were like, he mentioned the fourth line. And I was like, could you imagine if they retired all 3 of those numbers in one thing? Like the Sabres had the French Connection all up at one time.
Wow.
Like, is it that far-fetched to think that they would do that? No, probably not, especially at some point. So that would really suck to watch those 2 guys. And then, like, obviously Bailey is a guy. Mayfield, too, is another guy who kind of weird to see on another team. But then, you get into, you said Nelson. Palmieri also has 1 season after this. But at the same time, you've got Barzell signed forever. Horvat going to be signed for a long time. Sorokin's going to be here for a long time. Pelican Pulick are still going to be here. So, it's the final kick of the can for a number of these guys and it's going to be unfortunate to watch them go away. But the team itself, I think there's going to be enough core pieces here that going forward, let's say they win a Stanley Cup in 6 years, I'm just throwing a number out there. It'll still have enough connective tissue back to this era where you can be like, okay, that was pretty cool. I think that was, there was still, you could still see the threads going back to the conference finals runs, the first Trotz year where they, with Leonard and they beat the Penguins. So, it's going to be little bits and pieces. That's the thing. Maybe that makes it either better or worse, right?
Yeah, that's the question, right? Like this it's almost like with the Bailey thing going on right now. Like, we know it's coming. Is it good to know that this is like almost 100% certainly going to happen?
Yeah.
Or would you have just liked to wake up in the morning and be like, oh man, Josh Bailey's on the Dallas Stars?
Well, I think, I think there's 2 sides to every coin. I think what Dan said was well stated. And yes, some guys will still be here though, because of the circumstances of their contracts. Right. I look at look at the Golden Knights right now, right? They have only a very small shred of that expansion team that everyone loved, but that small shred is like their core. It's Smith, it's Theodore, it's Carlson, and those guys are about to win a championship. After adding the necessary tools in Mark Stone, Jack Eichel, Alex Pietrangelo. So like they were very aggressive in their rebuild, and they probably have actually less assets than the Islanders somehow and still make these things happen. So I understand being pessimistic on like, can they make these trades? But at the same time, and is this the last kick of the can for this roster? At the same time, the other side is of this could be greener in the Golden Knights situation where, if they have to tear it down and just do some sort of aggressive retool, you're looking at the possibility of adding the star power that you need, like the Golden Knights did. So,
yeah, I'm not sure what to think. Mike, I think you're kind of bringing me over with the emotion, because, and I think and I'm looking at it from kind of both sides of of the timeline, Mike and Dan. So like, yes, in 6 years they can win the cup, but I would think back to the 2011 team. I think of that fight night group and that the DNA. I wrote an article years ago that night forged the DNA of the team that we see today. And even though I wrote that article 2 years ago, and the players have largely changed. I don't know if there's anybody on maybe was Martin a young Martin?
Martin, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was a clean sucker punch on Max Talbot.
But he deserved it. But
exactly.
Thinking about that thread, if in 6 years from now, and I'm not going to do the math. I refuse to actually do that. But whatever that time period is in between that, there are threads there, and there are these time periods for the Islanders, maybe more than other teams. These very, and maybe just because we're Islander fans, that's what I know. Very distinct eras of Islanders hockey, where I'm sure the generations that kind of rubbed up against two eras of, in our case, the late 90s and today versus the late 80s when they were moving on from those players. And even before that, they were moving on from the original Islanders. And there's these very distinct time periods in Islanders history. And are we in the fourth, moving on to the fifth wave at some point? It is very hard to move on. And God, if I didn't forget about, Nielsen, Oposo, Molson, Hamonic, and Tavares, and just kind of like lumping them all together, and of course, like Brad Boys. I'm just kidding, but like these Parento, who that was, he was important.
Sure,
right? You can joke about him all you want, but Eberle before Eberle, for all intents and purposes, right? At least like riding shotgun with the Tavares, like you just have these players that just mean. Look, I've not been a huge proponent of Josh Bailey, but it's going to sting more than I thought it would.
Yeah.
Kind of moving on. I wrote articles about it. I'm sure everyone did. But it's to me, it's time to just move on if they're actually going to take that step, because they were right there.
Yeah.
I don't know, sniffing it. Like it was rubbed on their faces. Like they were so close, and to take the step back that they did the last 2 years and not look like that Islander playoff team against the Carolina Hurricanes the whole time outside of 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what hurts more, not winning or losing these players that have kind of become the core of what we know as Islanders.
Yeah. And
it doesn't make it any easier, for sure.
Yeah, Bailey was at fight night too. He fought Pascal Dupuis, but it's right. Like that night changed everything, I think. And we've talked about this on Islanders Anxiety when we talk about this night a lot. And that night set the Islanders on a path where they just stopped becoming a punching bag for a little while. Like
Zenon Konopka quote on TSN saying we're whatever it was, we're not a joke anymore.
Right. Exactly.
And we're going to stand up for ourselves. It doesn't matter if we win or lose. You'll know we're there, kind of that, whatever that quote is.
I believe in that stuff too. Like that, like Bailey and Martin were on that team. That kind of attitude gets forged in them. Bailey especially.
Yeah.
And then they pass it on, and like this kind of Islanders identity. The Islanders, we used to joke about like identity being this kind of farcical, like mythological thing forever, because the Islanders just didn't have one for our whole lives, and then all of a sudden they got one, and now everybody just associates the Islanders with the identity that they have now, which, for better or worse, is the team, we over me, etc. No star power, punishing, heavy hockey, whatever you want to call it. And that is what you're talking about. Like this era of Islander hockey, if we do move on, when we do move on, like that identity probably goes with it. And I've really enjoyed it. Like I've enjoyed being a team that people were afraid of playing. And not just because like Trevor Gillies is running around chopping people down with a stick, but because they're like, shit, like we got to play the Islanders tonight. And that means that we're going to have to deal with, if they're going, like 60 minutes of just getting punished. Like,
do you think it goes away, or are there, as Dan suggested, enough of a thread there to continue with, it's a different era. I don't know that it's the same exact thing, but, Nelson and Lee join in 2012 or 13. They actually play the Penguins in that series. They do pretty well. I was joking with Dan before about the Rob Brennan quote. It was actually closer than we thought. That it looked on paper, blah blah blah. But then there's 2015. A lot of those players are still around. As time goes on, they've been in a lot of playoffs. If you really look at it, which is crazy. Like the most time since the 80s. That over the last 10 years, they've actually made. This isn't the early 2000s. Like 2000, like Laviolette to Ted Nolan 2010, or whenever he leaves the Islanders. This is well after that, where the last going on a decade and a half, how many times have they made the playoffs? Right, more often than not.
Yeah, the Islanders are like a playoff team to people on the outside. I have a friend who's a Canadiens fan. He's just like, the playoffs are weird without the Islanders in it. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like,
it's insane.
Playoffs are weird. Right. Like the Islanders make the playoffs. I think it's a huge deal still, because it's been instilled in me to think that way.
Yeah. Well, because they missed the playoffs for 2 years in a row, and I'm like, it's 1997. Just hang it up. I'm done. Yeah. Wait until next year. Lou's not going to do anything. Yep. Call me next April. I was joking with Joe Bono on Twitter. I was like, so nothing's happening, right? I don't have to do the podcast all year. Yeah. So much time on my hands. All of a sudden, I don't want to watch games. My girlfriend's going to be thrilled. Call me in April next year. Let's have the same conversation about what they should do. And here's the company line and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Mike, I mean, you're bringing me in with the hope here, though. I'll say this. I'm the pessimistic one out of James. So
I think this is the Trotz thing. Like Dan and I think before Barry Trotz, Dan and I, if you listen to our show in 2017 or whenever, you'd be like, wow, these guys hate the Islanders. And it's true. I hate the Islanders as much as I love the Islanders. Yeah. That's a lot. But like then what ended up happening was like the identity and the culture, everything, all that stuff actually changed. And like I said, that stuff felt like a myth. Yeah. Like it's something you couldn't tangibly feel. And then it changed. And so did we. Like we changed along with it.
I always go back to this. I've said this on Anxiety a lot. There was a game in Winnipeg the first year, against Winnipeg, the first year Trotz was coaching, and they lost. And that was the year after Winnipeg had gone to the Western Conference Finals. And somebody asked Trotz, are you happy with your guys? They hung in there against, a really, really good team. And his answer was, they're not paid to hang in. They're paid to win. And like, it felt like my mind, I was like Neo in the Matrix. Like all of a sudden I was plugged in to a completely different reality than I had experienced before, or unplugged, whatever you want to say. And I was just like, oh my God, you can say that? Like, that's a thing you can actually articulate as a coach. You're paid to win what, games? Like a lot of games. And then they went on to the play. And this is what Mike and I talk about all the time. Like people, we're going to love Barry Trotz no matter what. Like, thank God he's in Nashville. He ended up someplace else. we won't name a few other franchises, but like that changed the perception of this team. Between him and Lou, I mean, Lou is not perfect. We talked about it off the top of the show, but like these two guys have changed the perception of this team. And like, we're sitting here talking about a team that, we're mad that they lost in the first round of the playoffs.
It's bizarre.
Like, I can very clearly,
good.
Yeah, I can very clearly remember a time when just making the playoffs would have been a pipe dream, let alone actually doing it. And now we're mad. We're pissed off. How can you do that to us?
Is Lambert capable of that kind of line, though? And
no,
even if it's not out loud. And I think, this is welcome to hour 2 of the podcast. But like, so this is, that's kind of what I'm worried about too, right? Yeah. I felt like there was a lack that provided accountability.
Yeah.
And what I didn't see from, and I put the lead on ice leadership at fault just as much as behind the bench, and perhaps in the box too with Lou. There was no accountability. How to not start on time.
Yeah.
In the playoffs and all that stuff, it didn't seem like Lambert had the ability to really pull them in and pull them together. And again, I don't. Lee obviously didn't have that ability either, or Nelson or Clutterbuck, whether or not he was playing and hurt or whatever. That was one of my big problems all season.
Yeah,
who is leading this team?
Yeah, I think that gets back to what we were talking about before, what James was talking about. Like, just the tools weren't there. It just, I don't think it's that they didn't want to start on time. I just don't think that they, could get the things going because they, it was easy to stop them. They didn't move the puck fast enough. They didn't do enough fast enough. Yeah. And there you go.
Yeah. When you open the game against Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and Morgan Riley, and you're trotting out, Fashing, Pajot, and ex-player who was on the third line that night, it's just, you're gonna get steamrolled in the opening minutes, and suddenly you're on your heels.
Yeah, but that's been their whole life. That's been the identity, though, was they're just perpetual underdogs, which is probably just not the it's the larger narrative, but I don't necessarily see them as that. They're not as skilled, but I don't know, they keep making it. I guess at some point there's something, but that's kind of why I asked that question earlier with, are we overplaying that narrative that they made those back-to-back conference finals? Like, are they not that team anymore? Despite large groups of those players still kind of being around and that identity being mostly intact, I'm not sure. I'm kind of pushing and pulling. Is it whether or not Bailey leaves this season? Did the identity as it left the building? Did it change, or is it just the identity ran out of gas? I'm not 100% sure anymore. This is truly like, I think whether or not Bailey plays another game as a New York Islander, this is the test for their identity. It's not going to leave with Bailey, but it could provide the hammer for the last nail in the coffin for it, especially if Martin and Clutterbuck come back.
It's interesting too, because I feel like at the beginning of last season they tried to change the identity. They tried to be a faster, more offensive team, and then they kind of reverted back to their roots and became this forechecking monster again. That's what they are. So with the personnel in place, like, the culture can't change unless they, pull the roots out and put some new ones in.
Yeah, you can't play that. That was the funniest part of the season, was when the Islanders were like leading the league in 5-on-5 goals per game, and this is bizarre. It was like mid-November, and this team was just scoring 4 or 5 goals a game.
They've done it. They fixed the offense.
Yeah,
I can't believe it. They did it.
And then January came, and you're like, oh no, they need if they have a hope of even coming close to the playoffs, they just need to completely bring out the old textbook and go right back to school, because they have no chance of playing like that. This was a team that was just riding some crazy wave. And it honestly changed when Palmieri got hurt the first time. Like, all of a sudden, like, they couldn't score again.
Right.
Like, if Kyle Palmieri getting hurt sinks you, and this is another Trotz thing. Like, we talked about this earlier in the show, but Trotz said, like, this team is like an 18-wheeler, and when it gets going, you can feel it. And then, but once one of the wheels flies up, like, the whole thing goes up. And that's daunting and scary, because most teams that are good, that are going to the playoffs, they can withstand Kyle Palmieri getting hurt. Like, the Islanders could barely.
Nope.
Well, in fact, not only can they withstand it, some kid from Sheboygan who knows comes
Wilkes-Barre Scranton,
and scores 15 goals in 9 games, and their version of a Durando just comes in and lights it up, and then it's, gets set on fire in the playoffs and is borderline Conn Smythe.
Yeah, right.
The Islanders they never give that player a chance. They like, oh, I guess we have Ross Johnson.
I always think of Wilkes-Barre Scranton, Syracuse. Who else? Hershey, I think, with the Caps. Like, it's always the same teams that always call up. They always call up a guy, and he just immediately, like you said, he'll score
his
10
first
goals
games against the Islanders.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he'll get his first goal against the Islanders, or his first shutout against the Islanders, or whatever, and he'll score 10 goals in 15 games. And then he'll go back to the AHL, and he'll be like, "Well, now they're gonna sign him, make sure they get him because he's the future. It's like, how come aren't the dudes come up from Bridgeport? Oh, he looked all right. Oh, he's back in Bridgeport now because it's like a paper transaction. Oh, all right. I guess it's all right. We'll see you again next year.
Oh, they ship him off in the middle of the second period. It's like, all right, just
exactly.
get on.
No shifts in the third. Yeah,
yeah, it's crazy. And I'll say this just because I live in Syracuse and I've been watching them for a long time. A lot of that team has been together for a while.
Yeah.
So they get to call up a guy or two as they just marinate. And this isn't exactly like, Palm Springs. It's not a nice place for people to like put down roots. And I don't imagine AHL. I love it here, but it's not like I'm here in the summer right now. It's great. In the middle of winter, I don't know how they're doing it in some apartment in downtown Syracuse. It's just really tough. I guess they're traveling, but they're marinating down there for so long. Walcott's been there forever. I don't think he's ever going to make it to the NHL. He's a career AHLer, but Kucherov, Vasilevsky,
Alex Boulay, whatever his name was.
Yeah, no, I think he's still here. I mean, their captain's been here for a while. Dumont's been here for a minute. In the brewery that I work at, they have bobbleheads of like Kucherov and all this. These guys were just here for like long enough where they were going to do that, and that they were good enough where they were making these things. People have the jerseys from forever ago with some of these guys. Weird connection. Palmieri played in Syracuse, and I saw somebody with a jersey. And I was like, I almost bought it off their back.
That's funny.
Yeah, but maybe that's the case. Like people always paint the Islanders pipeline as a disaster.
Yeah.
But it's because they've been good and they've had the opportunity then to let these guys, maybe Ishikov and Dufour, whatever those guys are. Like they're clearly not rushing them for a reason. So maybe like that's the plan here. It's just they don't. It just seems like they don't have the guy who like they and maybe Durando he did look like that, and that's one of the mysteries of the season. Was that he looked like for the first time in so long. When was the last time the Islanders had a player come from Bridgeport that just looked like he could step on the ice and play a game?
I would have bought the jersey. I was ready to buy the jersey. He played like 5 games. I think he had a goal.
Yeah. I mean, he
didn't have any points.
And I feel like the teams he was playing were good. Like I think did he have a game against the Bruins or
he was far from a liability. The puck was in the offensive zone. He was
he was breaking the puck out. His shifts were short. He was doing everything right. And I honestly can't think of a player, a forward, who came from Bridgeport and just looked like he belonged.
Yeah.
I have one for you. This is gonna be very funny. Hudson Fasching.
Yeah,
I guess
it's true. That is actually true. We got to go back all the way to. We got to go back
to go all the way back to October.
Yeah, but like he's not someone that they developed. Like I'm talking about an Islander, a developed player.
I was gonna say Travis Hamonic might be the last one.
Yeah, like who is it? I have no idea.
Right.
I have no.
Well, the defenders. There was a time when all 6 defenders were maybe except for Nick Leddy and Boychuk. So 4 out of 6.
Yeah,
or even 5 out of 7 were developed in Bridgeport. Where it was Taves, Pulak, Pellick,
McDonald.
I think maybe Dobson was that 7th, and then there was quite a bit on that roster for a time where they had all developed in Bridgeport, and they were there for a bit.
Yeah,
they had not been able to do that with forwards. Again, so Lee and Nelson were maybe the last ones. Zizekas.
Durando played 4 games against Winnipeg twice, LA and Pittsburgh. They went 3 and 1
game.
in
that Pittsburgh
that
game. He was awesome.
Yeah, he had 4 shots.
Yeah.
He was
that was his debut,
1.
right? Wasn't that his debut?
That was his debut. Yeah. He had a block shot. I mean, listen, he didn't do anything spectacular, but he looked great.
The Islanders, as long as they keep him, the Islanders for the first time in a long time have that quote unquote 13th forward who will be able to step in, because look, we all know what Cal Clutterbuck season is going to look like. It's going to be I always say that he leads the NHL and walks down the tunnel per 60. Like he's going to be banged up and he'll play like 30 games, and that's not. It's just who he is, and how like you play. If your career unfolds the way Cal Clutterbuck's is, like when you get to this point of your career, you're going to be playing 41 games max in your age 35 season. So that is good. Like the Islanders have stuff going for them. Hopefully this hasn't been a dour podcast, because I do think like they have more good going for them than bad going into the offseason. And one of the things that's under the radar good is that this Durando guy looks like, or in a very small sample size, like we always make fun of Maple Leafs fans for like geeking out over the first 2 games of, someone like Matthew Nyes, like this guy like is unbelievable, like can't believe they're gonna have to fight back against the Florida Panthers without Matthew Nyes. You mean the guy who hasn't played a regular season game for you? But at the risk of doing that, it feels good to know that guy is waiting in the wings,
right,
and can step in when a spot inevitably opens up.
So I'll say this: in 68 AHL games, 24 goals, 55 points. Not too shabby.
Yeah, he might be a thing.
That's another thing that doesn't happen a lot in Bridgeport, is like you look at these guys' numbers and you're like, really? That's what made Kiefer Bellows such a standout guy, because he had that crazy 2-month stretch. And you're like, oh my God, somebody's actually scoring goals for Bridgeport. This is a first. Yeah. And then now we'll see where he ends up this summer. That'll be fun too.
Hopefully Durando is not just a future Weird Islander.
This is also true. Yeah,
that's the thing.
Please don't.
He's man, if there was ever a player, he's poised as future Weird Islander.
Yeah, with that name and
right.
The whole thing. It's the Papineau of the future, I think.
Papineau. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Listen, that's a revered name where we come from. We don't throw around the name Justin Papineau that easily.
I know. That's why I dug that up in my Rolodex really quick just to make sure I could drop it in this podcast. We've never gone back quite that far, so we wanted to make sure.
A core player.
So we've taken up a lot of your time, and I'm sure we'll chat a little bit after we hit the stop record button. But just thank you both for being here. We've covered a whole hell of a lot. We probably need to keep trading on each other's shows throughout the summer, or at least after something happens, so that we can keep having these conversations, because we've seemed to make a lot out of a little. James and I do this on a regular basis. We're like, this will be a short one. We'll wrap it up in a quick,
every time,
tight 45, and
then
we're like an hour and 25 in, and we're yelling about.
Well, just like I say, to keep saying to Dan, just wait till Josh Bailey actually leaves. I know. It's going to be JRR
content for a whole year.
Yeah,
the post-mortem on that is going to be something. The files that everyone's going to come out. We're going to rewrite him rewrite his history. The recency bias will wear off, I think, and people will kind of go back into to the annals of their writing. I cannot do that because I was not kind to him ever. So I will not be doing that. But I understand where you're coming from as far as the identity. But I won't. I'm just gonna step off that train immediately, just because I'd like to be there.
This is what we all do, though. I do this every time Mike and I record. I go in going, I don't even know what we're gonna talk about. And as soon as we start talking, and I'll tell my wife and daughter, I'm like, this should be a quick one. Really shouldn't be too long. I'll be done in a little bit. Close the door. Start talking. I'm like 3 hours later. All right, I'm done. We just talked about God knows what. Talked about, again, Bailey, Tavares, Justin Papineau, whatever comes up. It's all kinds of stuff. So that's why we're here. So no, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad we did this. Thanks for inviting us. And anytime we'll have a lot of fun. This is what we do. We spend all day worrying about this team, over which we have no control, which is a lot of fun.
We'll have a spin-off show called Worrying About the Islanders, as a sub show of NHP, and we'll have to just make that a thing. I'm sure everybody knows where they can find both of your work and your podcast, but just in case they live under a rock or whatever. You never know. Maybe the news just gets out there slow. They live out way out east or something. Where can they find both of your work?
Go ahead, Mike. I always throw it to you. So
my Twitter handle is the Big Lebowski with 2 E's, and I work at the Action Network, and you can find my work on Twitter. We have a partnership with the New York Post, and I'm always writing for them, and then Dan and I have a Patreon, which he runs, and he does all the podcast back behind the scenes stuff. I'm just the diva talent that shows up.
You strike me as the diva talent.
I'll have to confirm.
Dan knocks on my trailer door. He says, "Let's go. It's time to get out." I come inside and
You live in a trailer? Oh, okay. I know what you mean.
He gets the big Bruce Willis trailer.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, no.
You can't see my assistants; they're over here.
But everybody should follow Mike at the Big Lebowski and read and listen to his work at Action Network. He does more podcasts for Action Network. There was many podcasts for Action Network as he does for Islanders Anxiety. So he's constantly on the mic, and they're always great. And yeah, Islanders Anxiety. You can find us anywhere. Weird Islanders podcast. We got 2 more episodes this season. Every episode, we have a guest on to talk about a guy who only played for the Islanders for a couple of years. John was on the one that we did a couple of weeks ago about Trevor Linden, and we had a great time talking about the era, the jerseys, the fact that they actually traded for a good player for once, which is kind of weird. And then, we have our Patreon.
Episode 32.
Yes. We just barely missed
Tragically, That's not the right number episode, but I'm over it. It's fine.
I don't know if anybody's matched up, actually. But and then we have, patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety. You get ad-free episodes, bonus stuff, and writing stuff. Mike does a great newsletter. I do an Islanders book club, working on one now about books that are written by or about the Islanders and stuff. And we're just we're just trying to get our Islanders thoughts out. Basically, is what it boils down to. And as our media options shrink every day, it becomes harder and harder to find other places to read about the Islanders. And so, you know what, we're just going to do it ourselves. And we don't always have the answers. But I guarantee we're just going to keep talking until we're blue in the face. And then we're like, okay, I'll talk to you next time. And that's it. So
before we sign off, I got to know, who are your guys' weirdest Islanders?
Well, I'll put it this way. The guy who I and Dan knows who I'm going to say, like the guy who I've been waiting and I cannot wait for this episode is Cliff Ronning. Like I just cannot wait to do the Cliff Ronning episode of Weird Islanders because like, as growing up in the 90s and playing like NHL video games, Cliff Ronning was the just so good and so small, and wore 77, which always had a special place in Islander fans' hearts. And then he comes and he's wearing those orange jerseys, and like his Weird Islanders episode, I cannot wait for, because it was just so weird to me that Cliff Ronning was an Islander, and I understood that it was weird that he was an Islander when he was an Islander. So I'm very excited about that one.
They had a Nike Curve, like street hockey sticks and things from him. I used to get
he was a big deal,
stick, which is incredible. To think that he was that big of a player in the league. He made it to the Islanders.
It tells you where the league was, like the mid 90s, like the Cliff Ronning was like just like this kind of the underrated, like he's not a household name, but this guy's a star kind of guy.
He was coached by Barry Trotz.
Yes,
wasn't
in
he?
Nashville. Yeah. But when he was in the video
maybe
game,
Barry will be the guest for the Weird Islanders.
That would be awesome. If I can make that happen.
Barry,
I can't believe I just gave that away.
Barry, you're not going to believe this, but Cliff Ronning played for the New York Islanders.
We are going to do a Ronning episode because we have a guest who's already put in his like dibs for Ronning. So for those that don't know, we have a big list that when we invite somebody on, sometimes we'll go to somebody specific, ask them to talk about somebody. We just had a friend of mine named Bill Matz on to talk about Ron Hextall. Bill's a full Philly guy. We had a great time talking about, what Ron Hextall meant to Flyers fans as a player, as an executive, and obviously as to Islanders fans as a goalie. And so, but otherwise, we'll invite somebody on and we'll show them our list. And the list always gets changed because we're always adding new people. As of right now, it's 281 different players. Some of whom have been done already. These guys, again, have played for the Islanders for less than a year. In most cases, Trevor Linden was obviously an exception. And I got to tell you, sometimes I get surprised. And we had a friend of mine on named Phil Strum, who was a sports writer for the Poughkeepsie Journal. He does a wrestling podcast called Under the Ring. And he wanted to do a couple of guys. Some people can't, like they want to do multiple guys because they kind of fit into a group together. And so we ended up talking about Don Maloney and Darcy Regier, who were both general managers. But he had a story about a guy named Garth McGuigan, who played for the Islanders in the early 80s. He played like couple of games 1 year, was in Indianapolis and the minors for a couple of years, then came back, played another couple of games, and then was gone. And somehow during a fan event, Phil, who was a very little kid at the time, met Garth McGuigan and had a whole story about him. And I was like, dude, there's nobody who's going to pick somebody weirder than this, because I have never heard of this guy. I wouldn't know I couldn't pick him out of a police lineup. I don't know what he did. I don't know if he ever scored a goal for them, but that by far is the weirdest guy we've ever done. And
That's
and I didn't even pick him. Like I threw him on the list because I was looking at names and I was like, oh, all right, I'll throw him on there. Never in a million years thought anybody would pick him, and then somebody I threw it out to just picked him. I was like, oh my god, how the hell?
Easily the best Islander name
fantastic.
ever.
Yeah. Well, that's up there for sure.
I said one. I mentioned one to John last week. I don't know if this counts. You as the experts, you can tell me. Dan Boyle.
So we did an episode called "The Reluctant Euros" with our friend Desmond Santua of the Through the Island podcast, which everybody should listen to as well. And we did it was Wisnowski, Karpatsev, a few other guys, and we can definitely do a Dan Boyle.
Christian Ehrhoff in that episode. Yeah,
we could just pair those
wow.
up and just be like,
the
you
could do like a Dan Boyle, Tim Thomas,
Tim Thomas, that would be a good one too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird Islanders.
You know what?
Yeah.
Do I have? Well, Dan Boyle's not on the list, but I will add him onto the list. I don't think Christian Ehrhoff is either. I'm going to put him on.
Well, we talked to Ehrhoff in the Reluctant Euros episode.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, we did. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because he was very reluctant.
Yes.
And he's also
So reluctant.
very European.
Thomas, though, is on here. And you know what? I'm going to add Dan Boyle. He is now Weird Islander 282. And I'm going to put 0 GP.
I did try to redefine what weird was.
Yeah.
Because there was I had mentioned Rich Pilon as just somebody weird that lasted almost the entire 90s.
Yeah.
On the team. So
that's a good point.
Weird on the complete other end of the spectrum where other players didn't even get a jersey.
You can make cases.
And he had all of them.
Sure.
Like he's like the only player of the.
We've had a couple where somebody wanted to talk about a particular guy, but he had played too many games. Like again, we try and do guys that have only played less than a season, but they'll end up picking a teammate of that person, and then we'll just get to that guy anyway, and we'll just the whole show is about falling down rabbit holes. That's the whole. We start at a rabbit hole, and then we just find every other rabbit hole we can find.
We just end up at Adventureland, basically. We're talking about Islanders signing autographs at Adventureland.
I have a pennant on my wall right above my computer of Adventureland from the 70s.
There you go.
So I think that's a great way to end it here. We've come full circle. I'm not sure. We meandered somewhere. And I think, as you said, rabbit holes. I think that's just the definition of what a podcast is. It's just a rabbit hole about X topic. So thanks again for joining us. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, at Aspen Hockey. You can find James' work at New Jersey Hockey Now. I made that mistake last week. And at the fourth period. And make sure you check out Isles Fix, an excellent curated Islanders newsletter. And James, bring us home, buddy.
Until next time, everyone, let's go Islanders.